The group Babymonster toured the United States at the end of February and beginning of March. And today we are going to react to Ahyeon singing Charlie Puth's song Dangerously, which talks about an emotionally and intense romantic relationship, but at the same time reveals a very toxic partner. This dynamic is portrayed throughout the lyrics, so it's a somewhat painful, lamenting, and at the same time slightly rebellious lyric. And I listened to the original version by Charlie Puth, and I will compare it a bit with what Ahyeon delivers on stage, where the performance is more vocally demanding. And this tour was a good opportunity because I wanted to react to Ahyeon, who was the only one missing from the first show in Seoul. But now let's see what she delivered in Los Angeles.
Are you guys ready? This is gonna hurt, but I think this is first part. I know the truth. Drunk off the love, my others forgetting you.
This beginning of the melody is relatively low, not extremely low, but already in a lower range for Ahyeon. She is likely a mezzo-soprano. I don't think she is a soprano, because usually in the higher notes, she tends to resort to falsetto. But her mid and low notes, meaning all the ones she hits in the mixed voice register, which resonates in the head and chest, and also those in the chest register, meaning the register that covers all the low notes. She has a lot of volume. Her voice, like Rami's, predominates in the lower regions of the songs, compared to the other members. So, she is probably a mezzo-soprano, perhaps leaning towards the contralto register. But here she, in this beginning, she tries to deliver an interpretation, using a more airy voice, a bit more declamatory, but I think she ends up losing a bit of the melody. She did something more airy, a bit lamenting, but on the microphone, the sound sometimes disappears. And that is something that perhaps needed correction in this interpretation. In the studio, with a close microphone and treatment, it sounds very perfect. But here, in my opinion, she might need to adjust a bit due to what is actually being heard.
First part, I know the truth. Drunk off the love, my others forgetting you. You've awoken me, but you're choking me. I was so obsessed.
So she transitions from chest voice to falsetto, with an impeccable transition. It was very well executed. Here she is not yet using her full voice. She will do that later. So she is creating this contrast, with a beginning that is painful, but a more internalized pain, thoughtful, reflective, a reflection where the person ponders alone. And then, immediately after, this characteristic changes. Just like in Charlie Puth's original version, he does something similar. Indeed, she interprets it very close to what Charlie does.
My others forgetting you. You've awoken me, but you're choking me. I was so obsessed. Gave you all of me, and now honestly I'm not alone.
Another characteristic also present in this voice, which is situated in a mid-range for her. She does not present a voice with many harmonics, as we often see, and which we will hear shortly. Her voice is relatively more projected, a bit more rounded, with the vowels slightly more open and slightly more yawn. A minimal yawn, not too much, as it is not a characteristic of her technique nor of her voice, but it is relatively more rounded, as other singers often do, especially Rora Farida and Chiquita.
But you're choking me, I was so obsessed. Give you all of me, and now honestly I've got nothing left. I loved you dangerously, more than the air that I breathe. You only want prejudice.
So, these lower notes now highlight her vocal quality. In this mid-range, moving towards the high notes, but this is more of a mid-range, even touching not just the chest voice but also a mixed voice. Here, the harmonics emerge, all the metallicization and characteristic brightness, and even begin to appear a certain stridency that intensifies as she goes higher, to higher notes. So here, she started a reflection, but with a more rebellious tone. So, she does this high range in falsetto. This melisma, which is the sequence of notes on a single vowel. And this dance. Notice that it is like an ascending graph. And the song talks exactly about that. Of a partner who, although toxic, provided many intense and seemingly positive emotions. At the same time that it rises emotionally, it also falls, because of this context of a person who is imposing but brings negative things to her at the same time. So there is this contrast of good emotions, but with negative points in the relationship, which matches very well with the technique she employs in this part. This entire section, she is singing here, with a mixed voice. I think she doesn't have active belting yet. But this is the striking characteristic of Ahyeon's voice. Anyone who listens to this part quickly recognizes it's a high, noticeable to any fan, who knows the group, of course. But here we notice the metallic quality, the brightness, and even a certain stridency, with several high harmonics appearing. And why does this happen? She also has the same characteristic in the higher notes, just like Farida. Watch the last analysis I did of the show, of Farida's solo in Seoul, where I comment on the issue of the tongue bass. So the tongue bass rises. The tongue bass is lower. And she does this. And this, precisely, she rises not only in the center but also laterally. And even the soft palate also lowers. So here it gets compressed. The tongue here below and the soft palate here above. So, this compression, which is almost total here in this glottal region, brings this characteristic to both her voice and Farida's. And there's another girl who also does this, but I can't recall now. I think it's Asa. Yes, the rapper. I've already recorded a reaction to her that I still need to edit, but I noticed she has this too. And doing this brings nasality, but mainly this stridency, these harmonics that sometimes end up being excessive, so to speak. These are characteristics, and in reality, it's not that it's excessive, but sometimes it doesn't please some ears. And even, I noticed that some people complain about her voice, especially in high regions, in extreme highs, where she goes with open belting, mixed voice. In this full voice, and then many highs really emerge because of this characteristic of the tongue rising here at the back, and the palate also lowering here, closing up. The voice stays here. She also opens up. You notice that when she does, especially the I, it opens a lot. So her tongue base rises, the palate lowers, and this creates the whole characteristic of her voice, which is already relatively natural for her. And it's a bit different from Farida's, because Farida's doesn't close as much, so there's this distinction. So she goes into falsetto and returns to mixed voice. These transitions, she does well, but sometimes she ends up showing, highlighting the register break, but in a very subtle way. I listened to several recordings and footage of this performance, so I notice, you can notice a bit of that, but with just one camera, it's not possible to do any analysis, as everything is very limited, and the ideal is to be there and listen live. But from the set of cameras that I listened to, you can really notice that, but she does well. Absolutely, the entire song perfectly in tune. Her diaphragmatic support is impeccable, as well as all the girls, but especially hers and Rami's. So they have a lot of breath, and sustained diaphragmatic breath, which is excellent, and in this aspect, they are truly impeccable. But here it's really about the register placement. So she does this transition well, she does it well, but sometimes the break is noticeable. So here she stayed the whole time, in this region between chest voice and mixed voice. It's a middle region, where she sometimes goes to the high notes, choosing to use falsetto. And this characteristic too is also very similar in Charlie Puth. And there's still something missing in her. I pointed this out, I think, in the first video where I reacted to her and Farida singing together. There's still a lack of vibrato. She does it, but her vibrato is still very short. You can notice that she still doesn't have full control over it. She uses it in some phrases and not in others. Usually, those who have mastered both the register and the vibrato, this vibrato comes very naturally. In almost every phrase ending, or 3 consecutive notes executed, the vibrato comes naturally. In her case, no. Also because, for the vibrato to come, it's necessary that this region here of our trachea, pharynx, larynx, doesn't have too much tension. And this closure here at the back. It really tenses up. So this makes it difficult for her to do a vibrato, to let the vibrato come naturally. So her vibrato always ends up being a glottal vibrato, where she forces the movement. Forcing the movement of this vibrato. So it's a difficulty. And there's one more detail that I'll comment on later. Further ahead, there in that high note, she went into falsetto and it was a perfect transition to that falsetto. Very beautiful. So we see the contrast and the difference she makes with the first note. The first time she went with open belting in her mixed voice, and the second time she goes into falsetto, as she did before. She does it once, but the note comes out very pushed, very forced. Personally, I would change it. I wouldn't do it like that, even though it fits the climax of the song, within the context of the interpretation of these lyrics. It fits, but here it's always a game that I've always played in classical music. To what extent do I add, or try to add, an interpretive resource, but at the same time, considering my abilities to do so, and what the music demands. So I have an ideal interpretation. I have the context of the music that may require certain interpretations, and I have my abilities and limitations. So here, personally, I don't like when she goes to that high extreme in this vocal configuration. I think she loses quality. So it sounds a bit, maybe some would say shouted. That final high note, she did it only once in the entire song. So it's understandable, but it doesn't come with the quality that Ahyeon can deliver. And this also happens because of that issue of her closing her palate. And here I make one last point regarding the characteristics of her voice, which is that she could already start working on. Although, as I mentioned, all the girls in the group are at the beginning of their vocal technical development, but they already sing very well and far above the industry average, for sure, and that's indisputable. They perform live with the band, and with their voices ahead of the playback, but way ahead of the playback. So here are technical details that someone who sings notices, even though I come from classical music. But here she could already use a technique that Rema uses, which is drive. In aggressive songs like this, you don't need to hit that higher note in a full register. To show aggressiveness, you can execute that high note with more delicacy, but you add drive, where she, through drive, imitates a scream, because drive is, in a way, a cultural scream, or at least imitates it. So you bring that idea of aggressiveness, and it fits. Drive adapts to different contexts of interpretation, music, and lyrics. So here, when Ahyeon learns drive and can incorporate it into her songs, it will be perfect for the interpretations she usually delivers, because she has that aggressiveness in almost all her songs. When I hear her interpreting, even some with softer, more romantic or sweeter lyrics, she always chooses to bring this characteristic of aggressiveness, which is very good. But she could explore this with other techniques, like vocal fry, drive, and even yodel. She still tends not to use these in many of her songs. I don't know the reason, whether she hasn't fully mastered them yet, which could be the case, or if she chooses to leave them out. But she could add these, especially drive. It would make a huge difference in her interpretations, and it would make her less reliant on the full voice she always uses. This ending is very beautiful, where she does a so-called improvisation with some melismas. In this ending she transitions from mixed voice to falsetto, creating a long melodic line on a single syllable. And she did it with great delicacy, with imperceptible register shifts, and a lot of precision. She did it with quality. So, I don't necessarily need to add volume to have quality. And this is a point that I think could be changed in her interpretations, from the moment she adds other technical interpretation resources into her performances. So, I think what's missing is, actually, there are many things missing. She is climbing the steps, and this will develop gradually. But a drive here could bring an improvement of about 20 or 30% in her interpretations. But congratulations to Ahyeon. So, she's here performing live, as a soloist, with a band. Perhaps in the most important group of the current K-pop generation. And delivering way above the industry average, and that's amazing. She's a very young girl, they all are. I'm amazed by this. Congratulations to her and to the group for the courage to step up and perform. This is wonderful. So, if you enjoyed this reaction video, leave your like and comment. Subscribe to see more videos like this. Consider making a donation to support the channel through the super thanks button or the pinned link. Thank you, and see you next time.